talked about sovereignty and different words used, visceral and emotional and all that, right? I think, in my opinion, sovereignty has been obscured or confused by a lot of interest, right? And interest from everybody, from government, from tech companies, and uh, of course, general audience, right? But sovereignty, and in my role, I work with a lot of governments, including the Indian government. I had privilege of working with some of the Indian defense folks as well. Sovereignty is fairly simple, right? Essentially, it's four layers. The layer number one is data, right? Data sovereignty. We whole started with data residency, but then given the geopolitical situation and some of the incidents, we actually now talk about data sovereignty. How is my data protected? Nobody else has access. Nobody else has jurisdictional access to my data, right? That's data sovereignty. The second layer is operational sovereignty. A couple of speakers before me spoke about how can nobody else switch me off, right? Operational sovereignty is fairly simple, so that my business can continue. I can continue to trust that cloud or AI without somebody else having ability to switch off. Tech, this is where things become a little complicated and interesting. Right? Tech sovereignty means I should be able to build on top of that, right? I'll not get into debate of closed source, open source, commercial, right? But that's where the issue starts happening, because tech also means the tech has to be not only in my control, but it has to be good, right? The classic example, classic debate that we get, again, we have eminent defense folks, so I'll refer to that, right? Is India willing to wait 10 years for AMCA to come, fifth generation fighter, or is India willing to buy Rafale to fill that gap, right? Sovereign aircraft, maybe we wait 10 years, but we have needs today. That's where the tech sovereignty becomes a very, very interesting point.
Manda, sorry to pitch in, but just interesting input. The AMCA is coming with 50% indigenization.
Sure, 50%.
And sir would agree with me.
No, absolutely. I'm saying AMCA is great.
I'm just drawing a parallel. Yeah.
No, I'm saying AMCA is great, but AMCA will come maybe 10
Sorry,
years.
not AMCA. Rafale is coming with 50% indigenization.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So, but the point I'm making is AMCA is 10 years away. Would we want, or would we want 50% Indianization and use Rafale today? Now, that's the balance on tech, right? If we insist on every layer has to be India, then we probably will have to wait, right? That's the balance. And finally, the AI sovereignty, right? The fourth layer, which was not on top of everybody's mind, right? The three layers have been talked for pretty much for a long time. The data, the operation and tech sovereignty, even in the cloud world, but AI sovereignty came. Now, AI sovereignty is a little bit more complicated than cloud sovereignty or any other tech sovereignty, right? Why? Because I think speakers before me spoke, so I'll not go detail there, but AI brings a perspective, right? That means the data that it is trained on has to have the Indian perspective, right? It needs to have all the nuances, which in the first three layers were not so much. So data sovereignty is not only whether it is running in India, whether it is developed by Indians, it's also, is it trained on Indian ethics, is it trained on Indian languages and all that. So I think AI sovereignty is a step beyond that, right? Yep. And because most of the models are like black blocks, explainability is a challenge, I think that's where AI sovereignty becomes extremely important, right? Sure. And that's where I again agree with what I think Peter, you mentioned the small language models, Martin, sorry, you mentioned small language model, purpose-built models are probably making more sense. I think that's the way we think generally of sovereignty, right? The question that we need to all look at is sovereignty is not binary. It's not 0 or 1, right, as it is typically made out to be. It's a spectrum. Different departments, different organizations, different applications need different level of sovereignty. Somewhere you need to have operations control versus somewhere you will have to end-to-end the stack, like in defense needs to be developed ourselves, right? The final point that I'll make here is, see, life has come full circle. Those who are in IT for maybe 25 odd years, we saw mainframe where computing was centralized, to distributed computing where computing was distributed, to cloud where again that computing became little centralized. Now we are talking, when cloud started 10, 15 years back, right, all the big techs believed that there are going to be 5 regions in the world, right? Somewhere in Europe, somewhere in Asia, somewhere in US, and everybody will use cloud from those 5 regions. Today, reality is Microsoft has 75 regions, right? So we moved from 5 regions literally 10 years back to 75 regions. I think it's time to take the next step where we are saying the region is not only in my control, but region is also in customer's data center. So I think what we will see happening in tech is that the sovereign clouds will become a reality, right? For example, in Microsoft, we have now created something called a sovereign private cloud, which can run in customer's own data center under complete customer control, disconnected, air gapped. We did not do that maybe 2 years back. That's the reality, right? We kept on talking about software defined sovereignty until about a year back.
Yeah.
Today we are saying, okay, we have a full stack sovereign private cloud.
Yeah.
And I'm taking Microsoft as an example. Our competition and other companies also have similar
No, that's
models.
a very valid point, Manda. In fact, competition like SAP is already deployed sovereign cloud, and that's the way to
That's
go.
sovereign public.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is sovereign private, which can run in an air-gapped environment in defense.
Of course, of
and
course.
that's a reality because last point, we will have to take us out of the equation, the zero trust model, right?
Yeah.
You don't even need to trust the company that gives you tech. That's the only way we can build confidence.
Thank you. Right, very valid point, Mandar, and it was important to bring the industry perspective here to complete the full picture. Ladies and gentlemen, we have almost run out of time. I would request Pierre to give his closing remarks, and then we'll conclude the session. Pierre, over to you.
Okay, so try to keep it brief. So what we have been discussing here, we would say it's, when we talk about sovereignty and AI, it's openness versus security, the trade-offs, speed of innovation versus governance, global integration versus autonomy, public infrastructure versus private innovation. So these are the extremes, and what I wish would be for India would be if you could have something in the middle of these extremes. So the best of, let's say, the EU and the US. EU very much regulatory driven, regulatory first, innovation second, etc. And the US probably innovation first, and then, well, some control from the government. Anyway, that comes. So if that would be something for India, I think this is a good route to take. You said it, collaborative models, to invest in infrastructure, something like centers of excellence, where public and private come together to solve the real world problems in architecture, in healthcare, and all these kind of things. So if that would be a route for India, I would be more than glad, and it brings the best together from both worlds.